We are looking at a year full of interest rate hikes. In fact, just last month, interest rates were increased for the first time since 2018, and they were increased by 25 points, almost exactly 2 years after the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates to zero in response to COVID-19 and the pandemic. Now, one thing that's always discussed whenever we talk about interest rates rising is the topic of home mortgages and how home mortgages are affected whenever interest rates increase. And though we're not talking about home mortgages in this video, I do want to give you a couple of statistics because I think that it plays an important role in the context of the video and what I want to talk about today, which is used cars. You see, because of the fact that the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates, mortgage rates have also increased. To give you an example and a comparison, if you would have purchased a home in January that was valued at $400,000 and you had the average interest rate at the time, which was 3%, if you would have put 10% down on that house, which is the national average for a down payment today in 2022, you would expect to pay roughly $1,500 per month for your principal and interest payments. This doesn't include things like homeowners insurance, property tax, things like that. You would pay $1,500 for the principal and the interest on that new home purchase. Now, this is of course assuming that you would have purchased this house back in January, but what if you would have purchased that exact same house today with mortgage rates being on average 5%? Well, taking these exact same figures into account, a $400,000 house, the average interest rate, which today is 5% versus 3%, and a 10% down payment, you would be paying about $1,900 per month in principal and interest payments. This is a 21% increase, and that doesn't even include some of the other expenses that you also have to take into account. And this is the direct result of the Federal Reserve increasing rates, and thus the home mortgage rate increasing by 2% in the last couple of months. Now, the reason why I mention this isn't because I want to talk about home mortgages or the housing market, but I mention it instead because I always am fascinated by the impact that interest rates have on the housing market, and a shift by even a couple of percentage points can truly change the housing market from being a seller's market to being a buyer's market. And though whenever interest rates rise, home mortgages and the housing market is typically what floods the headlines, one aspect of the equation that I don't think enough people talk about is the question of the affordability of cars and how interest rates and the increase of interest rates affect the used and the new car market. So that's exactly what I want to talk about today because I think it's an issue that people just simply don't discuss, and I feel as though there's a lot of questions surrounding this topic. Now, in the United States, 85% of car buyers finance their cars. That means that they're depending on an auto loan in order to purchase the vehicle that they want to buy. And whenever you're borrowing money for an auto loan, there are a lot of different factors that come into play when determining your interest rate. Who are you as a borrower? Meaning, how long have you been borrowing money? What's your credit score? What's your borrowing history? How long are you wanting to take out this loan for? But there's also factors pertaining to the car itself that also matter. Is the car new or is it used? What year model is it? What type of car is it? These are all factors that will play a heavy role in determining your interest payment. Now, if we turn to my graph here, you can see interest rates on 60-month new car loans in the United States from January 2014 to January 2022. And if you look here, we can pull up the data from like July 2017 until February of 2020, right before the pandemic. And you can see that we hit a high in this period of time in December of 2018. That is the highest interest rate that we saw on average between 2014 and 2022. And that happened in December of 2018, and it was 4.96%. You can see that prior to that, the interest rates were slowly rising until it reached its peak. And then they started falling from there with a pretty substantial fall from December 2018 to January 2019. If we zoom out from here, you can see the full picture once again. And then if we kind of zoom in from right before the pandemic until present day, you can see that interest rates have continued to fall in. Now, of course, this is a byproduct of the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates at zero for the last 2 years due to COVID-19 and the pandemic. And you can see that this is reflected in auto loans as well. You can see in February of 2020, that's the highest that we've seen since before the pandemic, and that is 4.56%, and the interest rate has just been a steady decline since then, hitting a low just this past December 2021. And then you can see in January, the interest rate was 3.94%. Now, unfortunately, this graph here does not show the most recent data for today in April of 2022. It doesn't even show the previous month in March, but I think it's safe to assume that with the interest rate hikes, the auto interest rate will rise to, I would say at most probably 1% on average. So bringing that from 3.94% to 4.94%. So kind of back to those 2018 levels, which makes sense because of the fact that this is the first interest rate hike that we've had since 2018. Now, this gives you some context as to where interest rates have been and where they've been heading over the last 2.5 years. But now begs the question of what does that mean for your purchasing power as a car buyer, and how will this affect your monthly payment? Thus, how will this affect the car market as a whole? To give you some context, the average new car in the United States costs $47,077. This is, of course, up substantially from previous years, given the fact that we're experiencing insane inflation and car prices in general are up. But for the sake of an example, we're going to use this figure as our average new car price for today. Let's say, for the sake of example, that you purchased a car and the total out-the-door price for that car is $47,077. You decide to finance this car for 60 months, which is about the national average, and you put down 20%, which is typically the amount that people recommend for a down payment for a vehicle. With this in mind, if you would have purchased this car back in December of 2018, where interest rates were the highest they've been in recent years, you could expect to pay an interest of 4.93%, which means your monthly payment on this car would be $709.80. Let's compare this to December of 2021, where we saw all-time low interest rates in recent years. With these exact figures in mind, but buying this car in December of 2021, where interest rates were 3.85%, you could expect to pay $691.33 per month on your vehicle purchase. This equates to a difference of about $18.47, or less than 3%. I think that this is really interesting because, like I spoke about at the beginning of this video, interest rates can really affect the affordability of a home. An interest rate increases of even just 1% can make an affordable home go from being affordable to being not affordable at all to the buyer. But whenever we talk about this exact same topic in the context of cars and auto loans, interest rates don't hold the same weight, which means they're not going to swing the market like they will the housing market. And one really interesting aspect of this equation is how interest rates paired with the chip shortage, paired with inventory shortages, will all work together to play a role here. You see, whenever interest rates rise, even by just 0.25%, dealerships will typically offer some sort of incentive to keep buyers coming through their doors. Historically speaking, the average incentive that dealerships offer on new cars is about $3,900. This, of course, depends on the type of car, the time of the year, as well as the dealership. But if we look at data from December of 2021, the average new car incentive was cut in half, and it was at $1,900. This is because in today's market, dealers don't need to incentivize anybody to buy cars because there's simply not enough cars to go around. With the chip shortage, with dealership lots empty, with the war in Ukraine, as well as the tons of other issues going around as a result of COVID-19 and the pandemic, there are simply not enough cars to go around. There are significantly more buyers than there are cars. And because of this, dealers don't need to incentivize anybody to buy any one of their vehicles. So even though traditionally dealers have offered incentives to try to offset increased interest rates, it doesn't look like that's going to be happening this time because there's simply no need for it. So the question here is, how will interest rates and how will the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates affect the new and used car market? Will it cause buyers to hold off in purchasing that new car? Or will it send new and used car prices falling to the floor like so many of you, including myself, are hoping for? And unfortunately, the answer here is no. There is really only one thing that will solve the problem of affordability when it comes to cars, and that is the shortage that we're experiencing across every single make and model out there. Once the chip shortage is solved, once manufacturing bottlenecking issues have been resolved, that's when we will finally start to see cars become a little bit more affordable. But until that happens, unfortunately, there isn't much that's going to happen with the car market, and interest rates definitely won't have a huge impact here. People need cars, and there aren't a lot of cars to buy. And the reality is that an increase in interest by about 3% isn't enough to deter somebody from buying a car in today's market. Like I said throughout this video, there is really only one thing that's going to affect the car prices and the car market, and that is demand and supply. Whenever car manufacturers can figure out and resolve the issues that they're experiencing in the production process, that's whenever we will see substantial shifts in the used car market. But until that happens, I'm afraid not even interest rates will have a big impact. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.